Okay, so I don't do this kind of thing very often. I don't like drama. I don't like to make videos about drama anymore. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to insult anybody or anything like that. I'm just trying to prove the point of how powerful cultism can be in the anime and DC Comics or Marvel Comics community for debating and discussions. So Artie here messages me on X and wants to have a discussion about DC Comics. And he asked a question about Perpetua and some other things, and I say I can't really post all of that information in one little X post. It's, I'm certainly limited to my responses and how long they can be, so I'm just like, just go read Justice League Odyssey and find out that Perpetua was written by Darkseid, and then go read Justice League versus the Legion and find out that the Great Darkness was made by Vandal Savage. So it's a false creation inside of a creation. A box inside of a box should not be that confusing for anybody. And his response to me was, Darkseid never said that, give the scans. Vandal Savage was wrong and mistaken. He was rambling on about some BS, if I remember correctly. But you're not remembering correctly, if you did actually read it. I don't think you actually did.
Can you read, my son?
I just think you're listening to some other person feed you these lines and then send you out into the fire and laugh at you while other people have read this and read your statements and then in turn laugh at you even more, because the content creator that you're listening to threw you to the wolves and is probably laughing behind your back at all the funny things that you're saying, because all this was discussed in the comic book. So let's just begin with the 16 to 17 topics that this person brought up and got all 16 or 17 of them wrong. So this is the first one. Darkseid does explain that he made the creation that Psycho Pirate lives in. Psycho Pirate lives inside of the Perpetual multiverse, and it's his power here to escape any prison. So he pulls down the comic book panels of the greater omniverse and finds Darkseid behind it.
Oh my God!
And Darkseid says that he literally wrote the story verse of what he's living in, of what Psycho Pirate is in. So again, Psycho Pirate pulls down the comic book panels, leaves it, and finds Darkseid outside of the greater omniverse, having written everything inside of the creation that he lives in. This was directly stated in Secret File 6. Artie says that the Mahapralaya contains the Overvoid, which is completely wrong. It's the other way around. The Overvoid is akin to Parabrahman, and Mahapralaya's void is a reference to the Hinduism void, Mahapralaya, the Pralaya, the casual ocean, the sea of eternity. All of those names are the same thing. Parabrahman is the exterior void, which is the overvoid. The Mahapralaya is the interior void. Now, if you go back and read Lucifer 2000, Lucifer himself says that the Mahapralaya void is not the same as non-existence. They're the complete opposite. So the Mahapralaya is the interior void that is not non-existence, but the overvoid is Parabrahman, the exterior void, which is non-existence. And if you go back and you read Lucifer 2018, Lucifer and the presence's concept are sent to the non-existence void to be completely obliterated and not exist. So the Mahapralaya is the interior, the overvoid is the exterior. But Artie here is flipping that around, saying that the Mahapralaya contains the overvoid. That's not true. So it was later revealed that the greater omniverse was the lost Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse. Okay, so when you're reading Death Metal and the Metal series in Justice League 2018, the location that Perpetua is from, the white space, is not the Overvoid, but we thought it was. We didn't learn until later that this space was actually just more bleed space, and it was the lost Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse that was deleted in the 1980s. It was around this fake location. So we find out where Darkseid placed his fake creation. He placed it inside of the middle of the lost Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse. This was explained by the authors in this interview. And he also says, again, that the Pralaya is containing the Overvoid, which is not true. The Mahapralaya is just one piece of the flaw, and the flaw is everything, not the Overvoid. The Overvoid contains the flaw, which is all things that aren't the Overvoid. It's all creations, all of existence, the multiverse, the omniverse, everything you want to say that is not the Overvoid is personified as this flaw. Inside of this flaw is the Mahapralaya. So This scan doesn't say anything about Darkseid. And wouldn't this have been mentioned in interviews? Yeah, I just showed you the interview. And also here's the guidebook saying, as confirmation of this outcome, the multiverse was restored as an omniverse. Okay, so the greater omniverse is now restored back to where it used to be. Are you listening to the words there? It's restored. The greater omniverse is restored back to where it used to be as part of the multiverse, okay? There was a divide, and now the divide isn't there, and it's back to being one location. Got it? It's all part of the multiverse. Again, alluded to in the comics and described by the authors here. The Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse is the greater omniverse. That was explained in this interview. And that is what Pariah yanked down during Dark Crisis. So his response to this was, what the F? This is where cultism comes into play. I just gave you the guidebook, the comics, and the author explaining the same thing, confirming the same answer. And his response to this was, no, what the F? And I'm like, dude, like, the authors and the guides confirm this, and so did the comics. It's just that some people don't read the comics or the guides to put all these pieces together. That's cultism. When you take all of these things and all of these facts and these resources of information, including the source material, and you deny them, and you say, what the F to all of that, then that's a cult. You're part of a cult now because you don't care or don't really acknowledge the facts, and you would rather listen to interpretations and revisions and editing of the source material. That's what being in a cult is. So he's like, that's more contradictory than Outerversal Goku, and he tags Lumos. And I'm like, there's no contradiction here anywhere. Darkseid wrote the entire Perpetua cosmology, and when Flash left it in Flash the Big Bang, he runs into the greater omniverse and found the real Anti-Monitor up there, who is not Perpetua's son, okay? Back in the 1980s, the Crisis on Infinite Earths Flash was killed when he was fighting the Anti-Monitor. That's the last time that this Anti-Monitor saw the Flash. So he's shocked that the Flash is still alive, and he couldn't believe it because all this time, for all these decades, the real Anti-Monitor was way over here, somewhere else in hypertime and bleed space, and rampaging around, destroying universes. And when the Flash goes to that location, he runs into the actual Anti-Monitor, and this Anti-Monitor is in complete shock that the Flash is still alive. Now, the Perpetua son, Mobius, Anti-Monitor, knows the Flash is still alive. These are two completely different Anti-Monitors. And then Lumos replies, yeah, these are those silly, everything that disagrees with my perspective was a dream argument. And it's funny because Nyx Wotan at the end of Final Crisis starts to dream the entire cosmology from the multiverse onward. And here is the authors completely agreeing with that in this interview. So, like, that's the context of everything after Final Crisis. And I reply that the only counters he ever gave me on this was nuh-uh, and that his researcher looked into this for him and didn't come up with the same answer as me. Lumos never read these comics. Lumos never went into them. And in one of his videos, he tells us that his researcher looked into all of this for him and gave him that data. Tell your researcher, Lumos, if you're reading, no hate or anything like that, no drama, but I am open to DMs anytime you want to talk about this. Anytime you want to talk or your researcher wants to talk about this and see the actual panels, the discussions with the authors and the guidebooks, reach out to me and we can talk about this anytime you want. Okay, so Legion did tell us that the Great Darkness was made by Vandal Savage, and Justice League Odyssey did tell us that Perpetua was made by Darkseid. So Perpetua's entire existence and the location that she lives in was contained by the Vandal Savage Great Darkness. The Vandal Savage Great Darkness wasn't real, then nothing inside of it was real, okay? It was all an illusionary thing. It was all a trick by Vandal and Darkseid. So the plot was clearly cited as Darkseid attempting to regain his godhead and merge all of his other forms into his true form. You're talking about his avatar emanations like they're the prime version. And what Lumos had said prior was Odyssey's storyline takes place before Death Metal and Darkseid's plan epically fails. It doesn't matter if it epically failed because part of the other plan was to trick everybody with this false creation that was set inside of the Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse. Cepheal Core and everything else that was happening in Hypertime is just one part of the plan. So again, Darkseid's emanations in the dark multiverse are not his prime aspects. We learn later in Secret Files and other comics that Darkseid's intent here about the whole thing was to find a way to merge all of his forms back into one. Okay, so Lumos is talking about his avatar emanations, the M bodies of Darkseid, like they're all the prime versions or they're all the exact same versions. While one emanation was in the dark multiverse, this version of Darkseid, this other version over here was not the prime version. That version of Darkseid wasn't the prime version, the true form of Darkseid. I have no idea what Lumos is even talking about or why he thinks that's funny. It's wild to me that he would say or imply that all of these things, all of these emanations of Darkseid were the same or the prime version. That, like, they're all doing different things and they're all trying to merge themselves to become the true form of Darkseid. So I'm like, Lumos, Darkseid has tons of embodies and avatars, and his prime is the only authentic one. And one of the avatars of Darkseid opened the forge for Wonder Woman, while Perpetua and the Darkest Night couldn't touch it and absorb its power. Don't you think that's a little weird that Darkseid is the one who leads Diana to the Forge of Worlds to absorb some of its power, but Perpetua and the Darkest Night were on this rant and conquest of absorbing and finding new power sources, but they couldn't use the Forge. But here's Darkseid, who's like, yeah, go ahead, Diana, take that power over there. Let me watch, though, and I want to make sure this works the right way. So I'm like, just let me know if you want a one-on-one, and that's true. I have no hate here. If you want to message me anytime and have a discussion on it, let's talk about it. I would love to do that. So, like back in Justice League Odyssey, we see all existential threats, such as Perpetua, maybe thus negated through implicate revision through time. So this is what Epoch says like 3 or 4 times in Justice League Odyssey. He teleports into this brand new creation and he's like, what is going on here? I have no idea what any of this is. Perpetua, the Great Darkness? I've never heard of any of this. Sounds like I could just revise them with time machines, technology, and stuff. And he was about to do it before Darkseid blew him up. So then Artie replies to me and says, isn't this symbol the lantern symbol? Now, what he's talking about is this panel that I showed from Justice League Odyssey with a literal flying panel, a flat sheet flying through hypertime towards Darkseid's secret base, okay? Nobody knows it's there. Nobody has any clue that this is there. But for some reason, while the heroes are traveling through hypertime towards Darkseid's location, when they find out about it, behind them, they spot something hurling up behind them, and it's a flat sheet with Perpetua's totality symbol on it, and it's heading right for Darkseid's secret base, where nobody else knows it exists. Now, when I showed this, Lumos' reply to me and the other person here, Artie, was that, Darkseid's plan just failed. Just ignore that. Just ignore that entire thing. Darkseid's plan just failed, so that doesn't really matter. It does matter because this is Perpetua's totality. This is the literal comic story that Psycho Pirate finds and crushes down and escapes. So, like a literal flying comic sheet, a literal page flying in hypertime, flying towards Darkseid's secret base with Perpetua's totality symbol on it. And Artie's like, isn't that a Green Lantern symbol? No, Artie, that's the totality symbol from Justice League 2018 and Death Metal. This is Perpetua's symbol, okay? This represents the comic book page story that Darkseid literally wrote and is bringing towards him closer so he can enact his plans and keep everything secret. So his next reply to me was Vandal Savage was just BSing all of this to Batman. And I'm like, just remember that the 6th dimension was located below the greater omniverse and it was originally part of it at the lowest point.
And that's around the whole thing, like the source wall and the monitor.
Yeah, no. Well, the source wall to me is the actual boundary of it before it was broken.
And Vandal's fake Great Darkness was containing all of that. It contained the Great Darkness, which leads into how the cosmology was fraudulent and made by Darkseid and contained by Vandal. So again, a box in a box shouldn't be that confusing. Vandal's exterior box contained the greater omniverse and the fake perpetual multiverse that Darkseid wrote. Darkseid had no idea what was going on. That entire time Darkseid was making all this stuff, Vandal was doing the exact same thing to him. It's a box in a box. Shouldn't be that confusing. But his reply to all this was Vandal was just making up BS to Batman. And I'm like, yeah, sure, mate. Just ignore how Batman and the psychics merge here and found Vandal at the center of the Great Darkness. And I'm like, do you really need me to explain why you're extremely wrong in this? And I'm like, sure, tag Lumos again if you want to lose in a 2-on-1, because he kept tagging Lumos into this. And I'm like, the facts are the facts, all from the source material. And it's Vandal stepping out of the middle of the Great Darkness when he's found out and revealing himself as the creator of it. This is not something that's up for debate. It's only denial. You can't debate this. All you can do is deny it. This happened. This is what the context of the story is. He brings up another topic here when he talks about the presence being exterior, all of this, and more powerful than anybody. And I'm like, no, Roxogama in Final Crisis held up the exact same creation orb that the presence held up in Lucifer 2000 and said the exact same line. The literal same line and the literal same orb of creation, meaning that Roxogama took it from him and killed him in Final Crisis, because in Revelations, Final Crisis, Revelations, the presence was killed. We found out that he was dead. We don't know how he died until the end of Superman Beyond. And it was Roxogama who did it, who pulls out the orb that the presence held up during Lucifer 2000 to let fans know he's the one who did it. And his reply to this was that the presence was holding creation. If Rox took what the presence was holding, then he was holding himself. And I'm like, you're lying, because the orb is just a metaphor for creation. This was directly stated in Lucifer 2000. Do you want me to explain how wrong you are? And I keep saying that because Artie keeps saying, do you want me to explain how wrong you are? So far, Artie hasn't been right on a single thing. So, and I'm also like, monitors are not a part of DC creation, so Rox wouldn't be holding himself if he were part of creation, and the orb itself were literally creation itself. So it's clear that him and his friend here never read the comics, and I would love to help them understand more if they want to DM me and talk more about this. So you made up some stuff, you posted it in public view, and you just keep getting everything wrong, and all I do is copy and paste all of the source material, and you keep saying things wrong over and over and over, thinking that I don't have the scans. Like, I understand that you guys are trolling. I understand you're trying to get a rise out of me. It's not like, you know, you're tricking me in this sense. Like, I do this for fun, but I'm going to always reply to you. I'm always going to show it just in case other people are watching and reading all of this, just so people can see the source material posted on my end and you guys refusing to post even one single scan. So far, we're up to 7 different topics, and Artie here hasn't posted a single scan. It's entirely me posting all of the comic book sources, the authors, and the guidebooks. So he says another thing where that this scan that Grant Morrison stated in an interview was not a reference to the in DC universe. It's so obvious, I just think you're trolling. And the whole point of this was that the presence was killed in Final Crisis Revelations, and when the multiverse was rebooted by Nick Swotan, the presence was retired to Skyland with all of the other Skyfathers who are not as relevant anymore, who are not really worshipped so much in the new era. That's what Skyland is all about. It's for all the old gods of the older cosmology, and including that is the presence, whose other name is Elohim, who is listed by name on the map in Skyland. So his response here was to post a scan from Incarnate 4. The classic Great Darkness is above the Overvoid thing that we all know. So his explanation here was the exposition is given by someone who is gifted cosmic insight by the multiverse itself, so we're supposed to listen to Incarnate 4. But I'm like, no, the final scan, the final panel of that same page is this character with her arms up in the air questioning everything. This is the social cue that is missed by people who have social cue disorders, okay? So if somebody says, I'm not sure what this means, they usually shrug their shoulders and put their arms up in the air. This is a social cue for I don't know, could be, maybe, not sure. But that's overlooked by people who have some kind of, psychological social cue disorder, who don't understand social cues. So this pose this character is giving at the end of it means nothing to those people because they don't understand social cues like the rest of us do normally. They don't understand this and have no idea what this means. So to them, it's completely useless and doesn't mean anything when I post it to them. But this is the character telling you she's not sure what any of this actually means and if any of this is actually true. And we find out later, nope, it's not true. So his response to some other questions were to just ignore all of this, and it was all retconned in the new era. The flaw of the Multiversity and Final Crisis was retconned by the New Era, which is total nonsense because this is an editorial marketing response saying that the flaw from Final Crisis and the Multiversity is a representation of everything that will ever be written in DC Comics, everything that ever was, is, or ever will be. It includes every future canon and story and non-canon event or anything else ever that will ever be written. But for the entire future of the DC universe as well, it includes everything. It's a story about all of the future stories, all of the current stories, and all of the past stories. Everything. That's from marketing, not from me. That's from marketing saying that. So another denial of the author and editorial interview. And we go on again further about Psycho Pirate and what he said. And I told him that Psycho Pirate explains that the creation that he's from is only a few months old and everybody seems like they're being tricked. And Psycho Pirate pulls down the comic panels and leaves the greater omniverse. And he's like, where was this said? Where was that said? I've never seen it. Where does the scan say that? So I post the scan again. And I'm like, I have to jingle the keys for the baby to understand and pay attention. The Great Darkness made by Vandal Savage was fake. Okay? And it contains the greater omniverse where Psycho Pirate lives in, and this multiverse is made by Perpetua. So if the multiverse that Psycho Pirate lives in is only a few months old, it's not real. Okay? It was fake, and Psycho Pirate found out it was fake. This was stated in Secret File 6. There's no reason to continue this and say, where was it said in that scan? We had a whole comic book issue dedicated to this. So look, the point I'm trying to make here, after 16 topics, 16 questions, 16 responses from Artie, and getting all 16 wrong, is just that you're listening to the wrong people, okay? People have bias. They, for some reason, love the Perpetua arc because Scott Snyder's series seemed like it undid the canons of Final Crisis and Multiversity. And a lot of people hate Final Crisis and Multiversity, so they were so happy that Scott's new series came out and kind of seemed to retcon all of that stuff and completely ignore it. But then later, we found out, nope, that entire cosmology is still inside of the Final Crisis and Multiversity cosmology. It's still in line with the Multiversity cosmology. It's just located elsewhere in another multiverse. The greater omniverse and the Perpetua creation exist in bleed space and hypertime somewhere on this map, on the Multiversity map. It's located in the original Crisis on Infinite Earths multiverse. It's somewhere else, okay? In the middle of that multiverse is the greater omniverse and the Perpetua creation. That's where the entire Metal series Onward to Dark Crisis takes place. Okay? It has nothing to do with the main other areas of bleed space. A lot of people cannot accept this. They can't accept it even with the authors, the comic, and the guidebook saying it. This is cultism 101. You're not going to listen to the source material, you're not going to listen to the authors, and you're not going to listen to the guidebooks. You're certainly not going to listen to anybody else repeat all of that to you. You're only going to listen to the people who pander to your preferences. That means you're a cultist, okay? If you're only listening to your favorite content creator tell you the things that you want to hear that aren't true, that's called being in a cult.